Hi, my name is Douglas Smith. Welcome to my channel. This is the first video and what will hopefully be a successful YouTube channel. My other channel is more of a hobby channel, but hasn't had a whole lot of success. My hopes is that this will. But first I'm going to tell you about myself. How I grew up, where I grew up, and what life was like, and how things have turned out. Here's my life. I was born in 1971 at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. My mother and I moved around for a few months before moving to San Diego to be with my father. My mother grew up in North Carolina. She had come from a poor family and had been out of the Army for a few years before I had been born. My father grew up in California and had also come from a poor family and was still in the Army when he had met my mother. My memory started about age 3, where I lived in Pacific Beach. From there we moved to Normal Heights. In Normal Heights I was known as Dougie Felton Street. My first real memories start there. I remember stepping on a bee on the walkway in our apartments. I remember having my thumbnail ripped off on the gates of the apartment complex. I remember also thinking that the sprinklers outside the gates was Watergate. Made sense to me. I remember fishing with my dad. I remember riding on the back of his dad's 10-speed and going to the zoo while my dad did his work for his anthropology class at SDSU. I spent more time with monkeys than I did with kids my own age. But then Mom got pregnant and gave birth to my little sister. Shortly after, we moved into the house next to our apartments. We had a yard now, and my dad and I grew a garden. Now I don't remember everything, but I do remember the radishes. They were hot as hell, but I still ate them. I also remember playing in the woodpile in the neighbor's yard and stepping on a 16-penny nail that popped through the top of my foot. I remember this very well, trying to walk away and dragging the 2x4 until I lifted my foot and the weight of the 2x4 slid the nail out of my little foot. I remember running home then blank. I don't remember anything after that. By this time I was more than my mother and father could handle. If they tried to spank me, I did the ass dodge hop. If they tried to punish me and put me in my room, I'd just climb out the window. I also started preschool and felt like I didn't belong. But to me those were the good days, the best days of my life. Innocent and free. Just before I turned 5, we moved to Lemon Grove, California. I had started kindergarten and was quickly diagnosed with astigmatism and had to wear glasses. I also started to perceive the world around me at that time. I got into my first fight at age 5. I didn't know anything about fighting or why the 2 kids attacked me, but something deep inside rose up and I grabbed the braver of the 2 kids' hair and ripped his hair out and even parts of his scalp. At seeing this, the other kid ran like hell. I went home and said nothing to anyone. However, the next day at school, I was confronted by the principal and I got into trouble for it. I explained to him what happened, but I was still the one who got the spanking. Yeah, back then they would spank you in school. Later in that week I ran into the same kid whose hair I had pulled out. He was playing with his friends at the entrance of Mount Miguel High School. He lived in the apartments right there, and he and his friends were riding their bikes around and having a good time. His father was out there and he confronted me and I told him what happened, and he seemed cool about everything. He even went and set up a ramp for his kids and our bikes, to jump off of. As I was getting ready to take the jump, he called me over, and being a kid, I didn't really have any reason not to trust him. He said he needed to tighten my handlebars. He used a wrench on them and told me they were good to go. I took the jump and landed, and upon landing, my handlebars moved forward and I hit the ground hard. I ran home bloody and crying and told my dad what happened, expecting my pops, the Green Beret, to go down there and kick that dude's ass. He didn't. But we got there, and my dad and his dad talked, and they wanted us to fight, me and the other kid. Now, I didn't want to fight in the first damn place, and wasn't about to fight now. So, we left to taunts of coward and pussy and winklings, etc. I was 5. On the way home, my father expressed his disappointment in me. I was made aware of pride and how mine should hurt. It didn't, but my feelings were hurt. This would not be my last fight. But things in that neighborhood weren't all bad. I had some good friends, and even joined the Cub Scouts while I was there. Got my first stick, or boogie board to you kooks, and the epic Star Wars came out. It sparked my imagination and creativity. I had dreams of space exploration, new planets, everything that goes with it. And like most kids at the time, and at that age, I thought we'd be exploring space by the time I was an adult. But as you already know, we're too busy killing each other to go to space. In late 1977, we moved again to La Mesa. This meant a new school, new friends, new experiences, and all in a new house. There were 7 kids my own age in this new neighborhood. Things were good for a while. Mom and Dad both had good jobs and were able to give us everything they never had, maybe a little too much. Now, from kindergarten to 2nd grade, no one ever said anything about my glasses. But at this new school, I started getting called Four Eyes. And for a while, I didn't realize that people were even making fun of me. But when I did, it hurt. So I started fighting back and trying to hurt people verbally the way they were hurting me. And they would come back physically. And so for me, life of fighting started. Always being in trouble. Adults would always say, ignore them. Now, when you have half a dozen kids following you around messing with you, I can tell you it is impossible to ignore them. So I stayed in trouble until I dropped out of high school my junior year. And during my time in elementary school, I realized that I would never fit into society no matter what I did. I was always picked last for games, always singled out regardless of what I did. But in the 5th grade, our class put on a play. I had memorized all the lines of the whole play. To me, this was a ray of hope, and finally to be recognized for something more than just a kid with glasses or the kid that was always fighting. And shortly after that, I got into the fight that gave me my new chance at a new school. I beat up my teacher. And the sad part was that he was one of the best teachers I ever had. The new school was a good one. I was let into the FAME program, or Fine Arts Magnet Education. It was the greatest year of my life. 1984, and I was popular. Even had a nickname, Noogie J. Yeah, kind of lame now, but at the time it was the shit. My crew was the Backstreet Breakers, and the 4 of us were arguably the most popular kids in the school. I felt like I might have a place in society after all. But going into the 7th grade meant a new school and starting over at square one. And since most of the kids were from the same school that I had had so much trouble with before, I was in the office at least once a week, getting suspended every few months or so. And at this point, I had already given up on looking forward to, and I was looking forward to dropping out at 18. Now at this time, outside of school, things weren't that bad. I played soccer for 12 years, and the kids in my neighborhood left me alone, having witnessed my fits of rage. During this time, I also had a job. I worked as a paperboy. Now, if you were a paperboy in the mid 80s, early 80s, you know how hard that work was. Working every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with no days off. I was told it was building character, but I already knew what it was. It was preparation for a life of hard work, little pay. After 2 years of that shit, I quit. High school. In high school, I was told if I fought at all, I would be expelled. So I kept a low profile. I was still in sports, playing soccer, and I tried to join the wrestling team, but that was short-lived. I didn't do homework ever, and wasn't eligible to play high school sports. I also joined the Civil Air Patrol and considered a career in the military, but after 2 years of that, I knew I didn't like being told what to do, especially from an idiot or the idiots who were on their power trips. But I also found I was just as bad as them with the power I earned as first sergeant of our squadron. I also went on my first date in high school, asking a girl to go to a Civil Air Patrol meeting with me. Or not a meeting, a dance. But shortly after arriving, she started dancing with other guys, and even went as far as to get into some of their numbers. I went past hurt and straight to anger. I would like to say that my drug problem started when I was in high school, but I had drank alcohol at age 2 or 3, smoked pot at age 5, and all that thanks to my uncles and cousins. But in high school I started doing meth, mostly because another girl that I liked was on it, and I would have done anything that she had wanted me to. We never went out or anything like that. And after a few months of chasing her around, I stopped chasing her around. I was done with meth. I was done with everything. After all that, I spent all my waking hours surfing. The ocean gave me love and joy and made me feel like I was a part of the universe, riding the vibration of the world. It felt good. While on one of my many surfing trips, I met a girl who really actually liked me. It seemed liked me for me, or so I thought. A day after I met her and we went out, I took her to Sunset Cliffs with a 4-pack of wine coolers, flowers, the works. That night, I had sex for the first time. I was 18. I was on cloud 9. We made plans to go out the next night, but while I was getting ready to go, she called, telling me she had a boyfriend and that she just wanted to be friends. I was heartbroken. And then one of her friends called me, and we ended up getting together. We spent 9 months together. She liked to smoke pot and do stuff like that, but I was doing my best to stay away from that life, and before long, she started seeing another guy. Once again, I was crushed, not wanting to be alone. I got with another girl, and within 4 months of being together, she was pregnant. Our relationship was doomed from the start. I asked her to get pregnant to prove her love for me, and she did. And all this before we had a job or had done anything to build a home. Now, we started out okay, but things got out of control fast. When my daughter was born, I already thought I really thought my 17-year-old girlfriend would grow up and, step up. I also thought I would do the same, and I was 20. But we did what we could, and we tried to make things work. We used drugs recreationally, mostly weed and LSD in the beginning, but later moved to meth. We also started fighting more, and I ended up in jail a few times. We were lucky, though. Our parents helped us out quite a bit, but it didn't help or stop our downward spiral. With my criminal record, I found it hard to find a job, so she stepped up, became a stripper to support our child. However, this put more pressure on our relationship, and by this time I was full-blown meth addict, and after 4 years our relationship failed. After our split, I tried to go to college. I got a few credits and went to adult school and got my GED. I decided I'd try to get into the Army. I was 26. But by this time I had a pretty lengthy arrest record and knew it would be hard. But I worked hard getting letters of recommendation and made it all the way to MEPS with my bags packed and ready to go. But at the last minute I got a call from the DOD asking if my ex and I were living together during an assault I had committed. Couldn't remember, so I just said yes. And right there I was out. What I didn't know was that the O.J. Simpson verdict changed the Army's policy on domestic violence. So that was the end of me trying to, again, and back to meth I went. I got a job with Atlas Van Lines and was able to support myself but not my drug habit. So I sold drugs on the side. Weed at first, and then whatever I could get my hands on. Although during that time I was also sleeping around with every chick I could. Most of them were women that didn't have money for dope, but like a good dealer, I was willing to let them work it off. Well, suck it off would be more correct. After some BS with other dealers and the cops, I left San Diego and moved to the Bay Area, still working for Atlas Van Lines and still dealing dope. I lost my job and had to move to Oklahoma, where my mother and father had moved a year earlier. I got another job with another moving company, but they didn't pay enough to support myself, so I looked for another job that would pay more, but that with no skills or anything, it just wasn't happening. I was 27 when I started at Tulsa Welding School. I had high hopes and did very well in class. I earned 7 of the 10 top 1 positions. When I got out of school, I bounced around from job to job trying to find one that I liked. I was also using meth again and landed a job bringing home as much as $2,500 a week. My meth use increased. While working at the job, I had a bunch of friends there who also used. Well, pretty much everybody there used. But one day a buddy of mine came up and asked if I was holding anything. I told him yeah. I hooked him up with some and warned him it was very powerful. It was a good batch of dope. He took it and left. The next day I found out he had died from a massive brain aneurysm. I felt responsible, and everyone assured me it didn't have anything to do with the dope and it wasn't me. But none of that helped. I quit my job and tried to distance myself from meth and from the people I was hanging out with. And once again, I bounced from job to job, struggling to stay off the dope. I started another relationship that failed in 8 months, and I ended up homeless. Sleeping in a parking lot of a church, I asked God to help me. No response. But on a Sunday, I walked in there and eventually decided to turn my life over to God. I sat in that church praying every day for over a year, asking God to take the dope habit from me. and nothing. At that time, I was working in a weld machine shop, and my boss also used. He also went to church and had some of the same problems I did. He was really my only friend, and one day he came to me and said he couldn't hang out with me anymore. And then went on to explain to me that he had joined a 12-step program. Now, I had tried many 12-step programs and never really worked it, mostly just because I wasn't ready to quit. I even told my family where to go when they tried to do one of those damn interventions. I was 31 years old when I joined Celebrate Recovery. My first meeting, I had been up for 2 weeks. Now, when I say I had been up, I mean that I had been awake for 2 weeks. I had been up for 26 days before, so 2 weeks was nothing for me. But I made it through the meeting and went back, and I kept going back. I found other meetings and went. I had it all set up where I went to a meeting every night and got clean. Now, it didn't happen overnight. I had my isolated incidents and took a new chip when it did happen. I stayed in church till about 2006 when I saw the real face of religion. I saw the hypocrisy. I saw how it was more about money and not about Jesus' message. I saw people who were as far from God as you can get. And it broke my heart. I left the church. Not all at once. I looked at other churches and I saw the same. And I haven't been back. But I had a number of years clean and felt good. In 2007, I moved to the state of my birth. I was 36. I lived with my grandmother, my 2 cousins, an uncle, and an aunt. It was hard, but I made it. In 2009, my mother and father moved to South Carolina, and shortly after that, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. 9 months later, she died, just 6 days before my birthday. A few months after she died, I moved in with my father. I've been here for the past 5 years. I had a job for a short time, but was let go for medical problems. I knew that one day I would pay for all the drugs I had done over the years. I feel the time creeping up on me. Since I'm in a ton of pain, I don't work anymore, but I have my YouTube channels. It keeps me from going crazy, and it gives me a few bucks in my pocket every month. I try not to go into too much detail so I could save some of my stories, some of my crazy stories, and I also plan to share some of my mom's ghost stories. And even some of my own experiences, of creepy things that have happened, not necessarily unexplained. Well, if you sat through till the end, I thank you. And I expect to see at least one video, or y'all should expect to see at least one video a week. Well, thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe. I appreciate it. Thanks.